Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you. G'day legends, and welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today I'm very excited. We are joined by none other than our father, Nick Doumtsis. We are catching up following a recent hunt together with Kayuga Adventures in Cape York, Queensland, Australia. And today we're going to be sitting down and sharing a few stories from what was an epic week of bow hunting hooky Cape York boars, where Dad had managed to take a number of good quality boars, including his new personal best. It wasn't much of a boar, weighing in at around 40 kilograms, but what it did have was some exceptional ivory despite being quite scrawny. So, Dad's been very busy of late, which you guys will get to hearing. He has had a recent shift on his mindset. He's been tackling health, fitness, and longevity with a new zest, and this all actually kicked off around the same time that he booked an epic trip over to New Zealand's South Island in search of Himalayan Tahr. So we're going to be discussing everything from the hunt itself, whether Dad loosed an arrow, and what's next on the horizon as we look ahead for the rest of 2026. As always, we are going to conclude the show with a couple of listener FAQs. So if you have a question and want it answered on the podcast, then please email us with subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au, or you can send us a message or DM through to any of our socials. We've got Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, James Doumtsis Outdoors, or the Twin Elements account, and we will strive to get back to you via those lines. And without further ado, we will jump into the podcast. Whether it's hunting, fishing, hiking, or any other activity in the great outdoors, Dog and Gun Coffee is ready to fuel your adventures. Their preloaded drip filters are a game changer and help you enjoy cafe quality coffee in the field. Their dark roast, the Samba blend, is my personal favourite. Even when I'm at home, I'm drinking Dog and Gun Coffee. Set yourself up with a subscription to get monthly shipments of the good stuff. With this subscription, not only is coffee delivered hassle-free to your door, you can also enjoy benefits such as discounted coffee and entry into a range of their epic giveaways. The legends over at Dog and Gun have extended their support to you, our valued listeners, to help you discover your brew of choice today. Use code TWIN10 at checkout for $10 off your first order. Shop today via their website or head in store to Venture Hunting and Outdoors, who also stock the range. Alrighty, Nicholas, Dad, you've been busy of late. Our audience probably wouldn't have heard from you or heard your voice on this podcast since our Rut podcast back in 2025, following our fallow and red deer hunts. But how have you been?
Excellent. Hello, everyone out there. Yeah, amazing. We've had a good year of bow hunting. We managed to get, as you mentioned earlier, my personal best boar, and that was up with Kayuga Outdoor Adventures and alongside Brad Smith, which was awesome. And I did a bucket list. I think we mentioned that on one of the podcasts where I was asked the question, what would you want to hunt? I think I said a bang-tang, a red deer to finish up the Grand Slam, and there was also the mention of a tahr. I've always wanted to hunt tahr, and I don't know, just it was always there, but it never happened. And credit to James, he rang me up. He goes, "You're turning 60. What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'd love to hunt tahr." He goes, "Leave it with me." So he made it happen.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and yeah, good work to James, obviously, for going ahead and sort of organising that trip. If anyone listening to this is sort of questioning whether to book that next trip, this is just, a life's too short sort of thing. If you've got, a little bit of money sitting there, even if you don't, just go and book it, pencil it in, have something to look ahead to that you're really excited about, and that anticipation sort of builds. And whether you're ready now or not, if you do have something, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months in advance, even if it's next year, a bull tahr hunt in New Zealand, I think it gives you a bit of, motivation, something to really look forward to. And I think this was one of those trips where for Dad, it was another international trip under the belt. And for him, we had always sort of revved him up a little bit about, just staying fit, because that's something that James and I take extremely seriously, is that we never want to sort of get out of our physical fitness just because we always hunt and we always want to be ready for that next adventure. And I think when Dad booked this trip, we'll get him to obviously talk to it here in a second, but I saw a massive change in just how he trained, how he prepared, his mental mindset, I guess, towards this hunt. Did you want to speak to that a little bit?
I agree 100%. As soon as that hunt was booked, James said, look, you got to take it seriously. So I booked a gym, my local gym, and I tried to get there before the hunt, sorry. I got there probably 5 days of the week, and I had a target. And what also made me accountable was I would send a screenshot of how many I was walking on the Stairmaster, and I think I started off with 60 flights of stairs and got to about 130 was my personal best. So there was a lot of accountability both from you and your brother, which was awesome, but also just for myself, because knowing that, it's going to be a bucket list hunt. And the mountains in New Zealand are epic, like for those who haven't been there, I would, thoroughly recommend book it in, because it's just, it's God's world. It was beautiful. Actually, I had a tear one after I got my tahr, because the guide asked me a question, how I got into hunting, and I mentioned my grandfather, and just being up there was like so close to the heavens. Seriously, it was just, I can't explain it. It's very emotional. Us bow hunters get like that, but it was just epic, beautiful landscape. So I agree with you. Life's too short, and I think, and the old saying, the more you put in, the more you get back. So no, I was grateful to both James and Ayden. They kept me accountable, and I achieved a bucket list that I didn't think. People think about, let's do it, but when you actually commit and book it in, and it's locked in, then you just got to take it to the next level.
I guess I have the luxury of knowing, or the insight into knowing, how it wasn't literally like turn a light switch on and I'm now fit, ready to go on this hunt. I know that was obviously the end product for you. So for those that don't know, Dad's in his 60s now, early 60s. I think you just turned 60 at the time of the trip pretty much. And so obviously going from, James and I are 30, going from 30 where we've been fit and active since we were playing sport in our, teens and early 20s, through till now where we primarily bow hunt and mainly just do this as a lifestyle, and that keeps us fit. We haven't really had that lapse, I guess, that someone in their 60s would go through. And I remember initially with Dad's training, trying to just get through the point of be consistent. Like, it doesn't have to be jump on the stair machine and do 20 kilos in your backpack for 100 flights, one day, and then the next day try and break that and do 120 flights with 25 kilos. It was like literally just take your shoes to work, your runners to work, and on the way home from work, go to the gym and get on a stair machine. And if your motivation only allows you to do 5 minutes unweighted, just with your body weight, and you're buggered and it's 10 floors, then that's all you have to do for that day. But just sort of set in a bit of a lock-in contract that regardless of how you feel, you're going to just do some form of exercise. And I remember just seeing Dad start sending, how many floors he was doing. I think he was using that as a bit more of a metric probably rather than weight training. But it was one of those things where very quickly he started going from, 60 floors, which might take 15, 20 minutes, to 100 floors and 100 floors in 40 minutes, to then doing 100 floors in 30 minutes. And really just getting that strength and fitness. And again, I think it comes back from consistency in this case, to just making it a bit of a non-negotiable with himself. But like we obviously spoke a lot. You sent us the screenshots. We try to keep you accountable. You eventually created a bit of discipline by yourself and probably felt as good as you've ever felt. And I know for me, when I start training well, I don't then feel like snacking on crap or overeating or doing these other things that we sort of take for granted, sitting on the couch for a long time, because you start seeing the results and getting a bit of like a sense of pride and going, oh, I've worked so hard on the stair machine to get fit. Why eat that extra chocolate bar, or why sit on the couch for 2 hours when I could go for another walk or do this? And you create momentum in your life, and I think it's through a bit of movement. But what I was going to ask you is, as a 60-year-old doing this training for the first time in probably years, like I know you've kept active with a bit of kickboxing and things like that, and work in the backyard, and you're on your feet all day for work and things, but it is different to physically training. Were there any like setbacks or any areas where you went, oh geez, this isn't as simple as just rocking up every day? Like I physically can't, my body's sore, or my back's buggered, my ankles are sore. And did that ever make you question like, oh shit, what have I signed up for in going to New Zealand? And where you've got to physically rock up every day on a 5-day trip, just say you can't afford to miss a day being sore.
Good question. For me, that was my first time I've ever joined the gym, because I've always done martial arts, soccer, football. So that was the first time I actually physically went to the gym and lifted weights. And I had obviously in-house advice from professionals, and they sort of said, what do you want to achieve? And we had a little program. But I mean, obviously when you're trying to build muscle memory, when you're trying and improve on your fitness, and especially when you're trying to conquer mountains, so you try to emulate that the best you can. That Stairmaster, after a while, especially every day when you're repeating the same thing, then doing weights and changing them around, I was sore. But I think for the first time in a long time, I actually started going and getting massages and just trying to keep the water up. I think I spoke to you guys and you said, yeah, that's a good thing. But I think this is not part of the question, but I think the first time I actually felt that it was achieving something and I was actually had this incredible mental boost was when we went red deer hunting last year, and we were going up and down those mountains. And for the first time, I remember one time we woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and we were on the mountain by 4, still dark, head torches, and we were smashing it. And then you said something to me. You said, Nico, I'm proud of you, mate. Like you're here. Like normally I'm, 5-6 minutes behind you and trying to catch up, but I was actually there, and I thought, and I actually felt good. Do you know what I mean? I was still wrecked, but I actually felt there was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and that's when I actually started to believe in myself. And often you'll say to me, your body can achieve a lot, but it's mentally you let yourself down, because it's so easy to take that undisciplined act or make an excuse. And then when I started to invest mentally and believe in myself, I think I had such a smooth transition, and my training was consistent and I was getting results. Look, and even when I was climbing up and down those, I remember looking, Mike from Real Kiwi Hunting, that's the safari we used. I remember he said, oh, how do you feel about going up that hill? And I looked at it, and seriously, it was not a hill, a mountain, and it was steep. There was times you got a backpack, you got a bow, and I remember I had to grab a handful of just low-bearing scrub, because you one wrong footing and you're down. But he was like 15 minutes in front of me. And yes, he's younger, and yes, he does that every day, but it was so intimidating to watch him just smash it like a mountain goat. So, but look, I achieved it. It was a tick for me, and I'm grateful for both you guys for keeping me committed and pushing me. So, yeah, thank you.
No, that's all good. And yeah, it's exciting to hear that your training, I guess, prepared you for what's to come. And we'll jump into that now and get talking a little bit more about this specific trip in New Zealand.
When it comes to broadheads, Kayuga broadheads set the standard. Their full range is designed for every bow hunter, giving you unmatched accuracy and cutting power. The Pilot Cut is my personal favourite. It's engineered for smooth flight, deep penetration, and lethal performance, making it one of the best broadheads on the market. Go to their website today and use code TWIN10 to get 10% off your order. Don't leave your shot to chance. Upgrade to Kayuga broadheads and take your hunting to the next level.
So we sort of touched on a little bit how the trip came about with James booking it for you and sort of just saying, you know, how much money have you got to spend? What do you want to do? What are your expectations? And working through that process. You eventually went and booked with Real Kiwi Adventures with Mike. Is that correct? Can you just tell us a little bit about that trip particularly? This is your second international hunt, I believe. You've done South Africa previously. So yeah, just what were you like? What was your expectations, I guess, going on this? It was a guided hunt, but yeah.
Well, James sat me down. He said, you know, obviously you and James went to New Zealand. I can't remember what year, and you really thrashed it. You went pretty hard on public land, and you just no guiding. Everything was, you know, done off your own back. And he said it was hard. And he just said, at your age, you pay a little bit more. And he said, you'll have a nice warm bed and you'll have a guide to take you up a mountain, and you'll probably have 1 to 2 opportunities a day on free range tahr that are managed. And he said, whereas where we went, I can definitely come along with you and your brother, you know, and you'll be working far more harder to get an opportunity. And he said, I think we just booked this safari. And I said, absolutely. And he was right. We were blessed. This particular mountain range had a lot of, and this was post-rut actually. So it didn't have the big, we saw a lot of the big mature bulls hanging around, but yeah, there was, you know, a couple of next generation, or, you know, what would you call them? Not as mature. I think my tahr went at 5.5, 6 years, and I was wrapped, you know, absolutely wrapped. But just going through with the safari, having a guide there, having pre-cooked meals, having a hot shower. At my age, it just, you know, it was brilliant. Getting up the next day, you were excited, started again, and you know, I couldn't recommend that process. You know, I could recommend that process too. You know, it's the best money I've spent. And, you know, like you mentioned earlier, life's too short. So, you know, you got to follow your dreams. And I did. And it was amazing. I'd do it again, actually. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, well, I think we've spoken recently about rebooking and whether you go back and look for a tahr or a red deer or a chamois. It's like New Zealand's definitely on the hit list for you moving forward over the next few years. But part of, I think, like the way I look at it from your perspective, and correct me please if I'm wrong, but like where James and I were in 2020 to say we were 25 or whatever that took us to, we had years and years up our sleeve where we could afford to go on a trip and potentially not get the results of maybe shooting a tahr, but learning a lot about the terrain and doing it really tough and learning about our gear, because we were hunting regularly and we weren't, you know, we didn't have our own businesses and things like that were back home that we had to manage. We were just uni students. So as far as were concerned, like, you know, we'd go on a tahr trip. If we were unsuccessful, at least we took it and got a bit fitter, put some new building pieces together. And then in 3-4 months when it's next uni holidays, string some money together, we can go and do a cheap, you know, DIY public land adventure. Whereas from how I see this scenario play out, you're in your 60s now. You know, the jump between 60 and 61 doesn't sound like much, but a whole year of waiting to go and hopefully redeem yourself. Like, I feel like you're probably more, you've built up 60 years worth of not necessarily wealth, but you're not, it's sort of like you're time poor. You're not resources poor or this poor. Like, you know how to hunt. You just want to go and sort of maximize that effort. And that's where I think going with an outfitter, someone that's done all the homework, knows where the tahr are going to be, brings you to a mountain. It doesn't make shooting them any easier, but it saves you 3 days of a 5-day trip, cutting out dead terrain that there's no tahr, or working out that, I want to get up there, but I can't actually get up there because there's this little scree cliff that's a bit too sketchy. They know every foot of that, you know, area that they're hunting and they're outfitting, and that's why you're paying them. So it's paying someone else to trust them for their expertise. And that's where I think, you know, from everything I've heard about what you've said about Mike and this hunt really comes in true. And I guess let's start off with what time of year it was, just to get a bit of a feel for. You said it's post rut, so I'm assuming it's after June.
Yeah, early July.
Yeah.
This particular safari specialised in a lot of American clients, so it was already booked out. And like I said earlier, James already had been sort of communicating with Mike and Maddie, actually, his partner, and they said, listen, we've had one opportunity on this date, and I think it was the 4th or 5th of July. So it was post-rut, but there was still a lot of nannies that hadn't or missed a cycle and it was very cold, and all the bulls had their full winter coats, which was magnificent, thick, sort of long manes, what I wanted. And in particular, I don't know why, I was chasing something with blonde tips. And only because this is going to sound stupid, but I can recall probably 10, 15 years ago, I went to a deer expo and I saw this shoulder mount, and this mane was coming down, and this nanny was, Tahr bull looked magnificent. And that's what first captured the dream, and thought I'd love to grab one with a bow. And I think I was spurred on with the fact that you and James went and had a crack, and I think James got one.
Yeah, James, we'd been a couple of times, and we've had different results where one trip my sight or rest broke, I can't remember, and I couldn't really hunt. And then we went the next year and got rained in, basically stayed in our tents for 5 of 7 days or something like that. So we're just sort of stripped of any opportunity. And then James, I believe, actually worked in New Zealand as a vet for X amount of months, and through that gained a little bit of access and tips and tricks, and went and did a few different public land hunts and shot both chamois and tahr and had a really good trip. So he's taken a few of those international trophies and experienced a bit more of a New Zealand adventure. And it's definitely a species like tahr for me, which is why I'm so proud of you for actually going over and fulfilling this long time dream, is because it's one thing that I haven't been able to do yet, and definitely have on the cards for potentially late 2026, if not definitely 2027. We'll book it in. But on this particular hunt, so you're saying it's in June, July, it's cold. Was there snow around? And if not snow, like what type of country were you hunting? I know it's New Zealand, so it's steep.
Very steep. Yeah, steep mountains. What we had was, we'd normally, and to be honest, as good as your guide is, no hunt is predictable, because, he's got his client's best intentions at heart, and he'll go, look, we're going to do a river crossing, we're going to get into this little gorge system, and a lot of the older bulls are there, because apparently, I don't know too much about Tahr, I've learnt a few things, but post-rut, like most things, the dominant bucks, stags, in this case, bull tahrs, they get smashed by the little blokes that are, who are now trying to service any nannies that have been missed out. And I never knew this, but Tahr bulls actually get killed, the mature ones, because they're just run like a red deer. Stags run ragged, and he's really hollow in the guts. He's been, servicing. How long's a red deer rut go for? 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Oh, it can vary depending on location and densities and things.
And I've got some videos, and I'll have to show it. I don't know, but apparently there's some old bulls that, because they don't eat a lot, they get really I think gum infection, so their actual jaws swell out and they look so deformed. It's like a rounded head. They don't have that sculptured, chiseled sort of, like a typical bull has, and they're just weak. And the younger, more vigorous, and I guess, excuse the term, horny, testosterone-filled bulls absolutely kill them. And I didn't think they would, but so they're hiding in these little ravines and little steep gorges, and Mike said, let's go and have a crack. But this particular day, we were sort of coming out of a creek bed with huge boulders, and then we climb up a very steep bluff, and a lot of times it's pig or deer little tracks that we're cutting through, and you've got very low vegetation or overhanging sort of trees that you virtually a vertical climb for about 16, 17 feet. Then gradually you get into it more open, more, I don't know how to describe, like tussock and very low bare. Because it's so windy and cold, I don't think they can afford to be this huge, robust thing because it'll get blown up. So everything's compacted and prickly and very tight to the ground. Probably only 30 to 50 centimetres. And so you're climbing up these hills and look, crazy terrain. And then we're hunting 3/4 way up some mountain range where you look right at the very back and you're surrounded by, I don't know what they are. They're beyond mountains. I mean, you know, so iconic New Zealand. You've got all these snow-capped monster mountains that you're looking at surrounding you, and just crazy. For me, it was such an eye opener, but such a blessing as well, because as intimidating as it was, I think when I believed that I could keep up and get to where I had to be, I just felt, I deserve to be here and I deserve a crack.
And that's, definitely where having that base level of fitness gives you a certain mental fortitude as to, I don't know how many days it's going to take, how many stalks it's going to take, but I'm going to put myself in position after position after position until this eventually works, or I go home knowing I gave it my best crack. So that sort of feeds into the next question I was going to ask. Were you seeing plenty of game, or was it like a tougher sort of hunt where the first day went by, second day went by, third day went by, and you're sort of sitting there going, geez, we're putting in all this effort. When's this hunt going to come, or opportunity going to come? Or was it more, you just sort of lucked onto one? Like, tell us a little bit about, I guess, were you seeing critters? When did you eventually stalk a bull? All these sorts of things. With innovative and patented designs, Eberlestock are industry leaders when it comes to packs. Being avid hunters who delve into the backcountry, we require durable, customizable, and reliable gear to get us into the mountains. We have been running their mainframe E-mod system with the Vapor 5000 pack and attachments. Their bino harness or chest rig with attachments like rangefinder and accessory pouches have been a game changer for run and gun style of hunts. We've recently returned from America and felt the weight of packing out a big bull elk, handling the antlers and meat easily, and can honestly say that they're the best packs we've ever used. If you're interested in feeling the same comfort and upgrading your pack setup today, check out Eberlestock, either online through their website or available in store at Venture Hunting Outdoors here in Australia.
Well, before I get into the opportunities of the actual hunt, I really need to talk to you about my guide, Mike. And he was probably about 6'2", lean, fit, and very determined. And he would often, like every opportunity, he made it count, And he knew where most of the nannies might be, feeder gullies or certain ranges. And we would drive around. I remember this one particular day, we'll drive in to get to a river crossing to get into one of those little tight ravines where he said you might get a mature bull. And I looked up, and on a peak of this little bluff, I thought it was a red deer. And I turned around and said, Mike, is that a red deer? He stopped the car, gets there, he goes, quickly get your stuff on. And we went racing up this hill, and apparently it was like a 13 or 14 inch mature, or really good representative bull. And I think we were gone for 4 hours, which was crazy because I didn't anticipate that in the first day. And so, look, to answer your question, yes, you get multiple opportunities, especially when you've got the luxury of having private property, managed herd, and an experienced guide who really works hard for you. Like he wanted to make it happen, and he really pushed me, really hard to make sure I got, at least I was 5-6 minutes behind him. I couldn't keep up with him, no way. And he actually complimented me. He goes, not a lot of 60-year-olds in my time, no one has climbed where you've been, And I took that. I said, thank you. He goes, your boys would be very proud of you. And But, and that's like most safaris, most hunts with people. A lot of times when you meet, you have the pleasure of a like-minded person who, yes, you're paying him for a service, but at the same time understands and respects what you're trying to do, especially with the bow, and is as passionate and invested as you are trying to secure a trophy or a representative species, then it makes everything so much better.
Were there any close encounters that you wanted to talk about before what I assume was probably the best part of the hunt in your task success? Or
Oh, look, actually, back to that first story, because that happened so quickly, we were meant to do a river crossing. So I had some hunting pants that can pop away and you can roll them up, because apparently river crossing, when you get waist deep, and he said put some Crocs on, so I had no boots. And when he saw this, what was meant to be a red deer hind that I thought, this was such a beautiful red coat, I'd never seen a tahr before at this point. So, and he just goes, let's go. And I said, I want to put my boots on. He goes, yeah, let's go. But I just didn't have time to put the boots on. So I've actually been following him up and down the hills in the Crocs. And I had slipped that many times. I thought at one point I'm going to kill myself. And then he turned around and looked at me and he said something along the lines, listen, use your boots in the side of the mountain. That's why you're slipping. You're not digging them in the side of the mountain. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, do you want my Crocs? And I go, I've got my own. And he looked at me, he saw I had Crocs on, and he gave me this look like, what the hell are we doing here? And at one point I had to have a practice shot because I fell in the side. Lucky I was falling into the side of the hill and I smashed my side. And I said, I can't hunt anymore until I have a couple of practice shots to make sure my sights are, so I had a 40-meter shot over a valley into a tussock grass. He goes, you're ready. But look, yeah, that was crazy, only because that was my apprenticeship. That was the first day, and we're gone for many hours. I was exhausted, but trying to keep up with him. See, as you know, New Zealand's very steep, and you're going from one hill down into a very steep valley that might have a waterfall run or a natural spring, and then you're coming up, and it's steep. Sometimes you're on all fours, trying to just lever through the scrub and the terrain, and it's wet and sloppy, and you're in Crocs. So it wasn't ideal, but geez, I learnt a lot. That was a steep lesson because I just felt my first experience with a tahr bull, and it was probably the best we've seen from now recollecting the whole trip. It was probably the best I've seen on that trip. But he didn't know exactly what we were because we never skylined ourselves, but he knew there was danger there, and he would always be one hilltop, away. And eventually he ran out, and he was on this cliff face, and we got to this very steep top, and I couldn't believe it. Mike said, you got to follow me, and this is very dangerous because either side it was like a blade. We're at the pinnacle, the top, and as we're looking down, I could see the tahr bull on a ledge, and he's looking at me and he's thinking, can you shoot? And I'm like, I can't. It was virtually a drop right down, vertically right below me at 25, 30 meters, which would be less when you're shooting down. But I just, yeah. And the other thing I was envisaging was I want to shoot this thing, and if I'm lucky enough to hit him properly, he's going to die on the spot and fall over into a ravine that's got a drop of hundreds of meters. I thought, nah. Anyway, it was amazing. So that was the only real dangerous situation. It was my very steep learning curve, but every other day I got better, I got more confident, and I had my boots.
Yeah, I find New Zealand certainly has a way of humbling you, but also it's a steep learning curve and you grow up sort of quick, in a way to put it, where you get over there, you're green, and you're sort of like, oh, there's a tahr, and this adrenaline kicks in, and you sort of just go on this mad little dash and hunt and somehow find yourself, like you said, on a knife's edge of a cliff. And then you kind of look around after the adrenaline's worn off or the hunt or the stalk potentially is over, and you go, shit, where did I put my backpack? How did I get up this high? How am I going to spend the next few hours climbing all the way back down, to the car or to camp or whatever? And then the rain starts kicking in and everything gets a little bit more slippery. Or in this instance, you don't even have boots on because there's this little misunderstanding at the first river crossing before you even started stalking this bull Tahr. And then, you're someone that's not even familiar with the terrain and you're suddenly creeping your way along in Crocs, slipping and scurrying across, and then you find yourself in this, situation that you could only ever dream of with a bull Tahr 30 meters away. But it's just, isn't meant to be. But obviously, all adds up to be this amazing adventure and journey throughout the whole hunt.
But another thing that was very eye-opening for me was you start off and you're quite cold because it's morning, the sun hasn't peaked yet, and then you're running up and down hill, so you get hot. So you take layers off and they go in your backpack. And at one point, I don't know, I think it was day 2, when I shot my tail, we had to crawl in a fair bit, but I left most of my clothes and everything in, and then quickly you just get cold because of weather. And that's a point that, I've never hunted altitude like that where, you've got a very quick turnaround in temperature. So you really have to be mentally and physically prepared for that.
Yeah, New Zealand, it's a whole different ballgame to Australia. There's a few places maybe in like the Victorian high country where it might be snowing or extreme winter and that type of stuff. But again, you don't, in my experience, have the severe terrain and countryside that's like, you could, like New Zealand's just so rugged and expansive and endless, where you really do have to be carrying everything that you need on your back. And the second you leave your backpack, you're really flirting with, am I going to be in trouble later on? And that's where, you can get caught out where, you're hot because you're trudging up and down the mountains trying to get in on a bull Tahr. But then 30 minutes later, after basically running vertically up a mountain, you find yourself within 60 meters of him, just say, but then he's in a spot where you have to just sit and wait for half an hour. And then suddenly the wind's blowing 20 knots, gets a bit cooler because the sun goes behind a cloud and you've just built up a sweat. And it's sort of this recipe for disaster. When you start getting cold, the wind's coming through and you've been sweaty, then you start getting near like hypothermic because all that moisture just makes you so much colder, and then your core temperature drops and you're sitting there going, it was all good when I had my merino base layers on. Now I wish I had a good jacket, but it's also halfway down the mountain. And it's just, it's just another level of complexity to what's an already difficult, challenging hunt in this sort of terrain, I guess.
Can I ask you a question? Did you end up doing a lot of river crossings?
No, we didn't really do river crossings. We did a lot of like gullies and things where we had to jump across or find rocky paths and things. But we strategically, for us, because we had to hike into spots in camp, we were trying to stay out of water basically, because you fall in and get all your gear wet. It's a different story than us going back to a cabin that night or a warm bed or whatever. We often either had a base camp or all our gear on our backpack, hiking to a spot to set up our base camp or our camp. So we tried not to cross any big creeks or rivers or anything like that. On the second trip that we went on, where I said, I think it rained like 700 mils of rain in 5 days, and areas that were dry, scree cliffs and rocky, rubbly cliffs became waterfalls, and then areas that were little trickles or streams became full-blown raging rivers. And we couldn't even, from where we were hunting, we tried to get back to Christchurch to where we actually bought our plane flights to go back to Australia. We had to drive the hire car all the way down to Queenstown and fly out, like organise different alternative flights, just because we couldn't physically get back to Christchurch. Like that's how much rain they had on the South Island of New Zealand. It was like, you hear these once in 100 type rainfall events and things. And I don't know if it was quite to that extent, but it was proper flood conditions. So yeah, things that were once, we walked over and it was a little bit of a rocky stream were then full-blown raging rivers where you can hear boulders rolling down it, and we had to sort of find alternative routes to get out, which was a bit nerve-wracking. And And that's why we sort of set the rule as to not really crossing any waterways, especially wading through.
Yeah, I was surprised because when you talk about challenging or things that opened your eyes to the terrain, we did a morning crossover. Then we spent most all day out, and we put our head torches on, and we're coming off the mountain now, and that was quite challenging because it's very steep. But when we got down to the bottom, I remember hearing the water, and that was definitely a change. So I don't know if we went to a deeper part of that system, but I remember crossing, and twice I had my my dry ass handed to me. Like twice he caught me, he put me in front. There's a certain technique. You can't aim for where you want to go. You got to go further up or higher up because you get dragged across a lot. And you got your backpack. I had bow, and so yeah, crazy. But yeah, it was all part and parcel of making your experience so much more memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think the animals that you're hunting there, it's almost less about the animals, even though now we'll get into the stalk and this close encounter that you did have with the bull tahr. But New Zealand is one of those places that constantly reminds you that you're in this rugged place where you feel, no matter how much you've been there and feel like you're learning about New Zealand, you always sort of feel like a bit of a guest in those mountains, just because they have a way of humbling you and making you realise that you're sort of out of your depth quite a lot of the time.
Leopold optics deliver unmatched clarity. I'm running the 10x50 Santiam binoculars, and Ayden's running the BX4 range-finding binoculars. It's their low light capabilities that make them stand out from the rest, spotting game at first light on our guided hunts long before our other hunters with their inferior binoculars. Rugged, reliable, and engineered for the field, Leopold lets you spot game and judge distance with absolute confidence. Don't miss a moment. Go to Venture Hunting and Outdoors website and upgrade your vision and your hunt with Leopold, the optics trusted by serious hunters worldwide.
Did you want to walk us through the stalk or the moment of the hunt for your bull tahr?
I think it was my third stalk. So the first day was that really mature, like I referred to, the best bull that we saw. And then we end up coming around and we got onto another bull that was, I think he was only 10 inches, but I actually was happy to take him, and I got to 30 metres of him, but he was actually bedded down below us on this, like a little bit of a ledge, but he had a lot of scattered vegetation around him, which covered some of his vitals. But because he was tucked in close with all the rocks, it made him a bit harder. And we just tried to wait for him to reposition himself to get up. But unfortunately, a couple of nannies got up and walked below us and slightly to the right of us, and our wind was sort of catching across, whereas he was a little bit lower and to the left of us. And they let out a shriek, which got him to stand up. And as he stood up, I drew back, but it just happened so quickly. He just started jumping, diving down, following them. And so that was my second stalk. And then we end up climbing up even higher to one of the highest points. And we're probably not 3/4 up. Can you imagine? I mean, how do you there's almost hills on top of hills on top of hills that become mountains. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like you're climbing up and you've got up and then you hit another mountain. Do you know what I mean? It's just, when you draw as a kid, you're drawing these peaks on peaks on peaks. That's what it was like. So this was the last peak, but there was a really soft, gentle sloping valley or face that all these nannies were grazing on. And there was a lot of satellite bulls, but there was two, my bull and another one that were constantly sort of shaping up, and there was obviously a nanny that was in season, because mine was really not letting her go. He was really close to her, as you can envisage with red deer or most deer species or pigs, whatever, so we now had to crawl in open country where you've got plants that we spoke about earlier. Like you're talking about these alpine ecosystems don't hold because of the weather. You got wind, you got snow. They can't afford to be too bushy and too high. So they're tussock grass, they're prickly little shrubby things. So we're now sliding 120 metres down to get even remotely close to them. So they're on one side, we're on the other side. We left our backpacks and we're sort of gliding our way down. And I don't know how long, probably close to 45 minutes. And then as we got closer, I just got more confident. And I think the first time I ranged him was about 52 metres. And I knew I had to make a long shot. For my comfort zone's about 30 metres, but I had practiced out to 40. And it just got to a point where we just remained very patient to see what they were going to do. It looked like they were going to go down into like a gully and potentially go up and over. But the nanny just, and therefore I would have missed out on my opportunity, but the nanny started coming back towards us. And this particular bull that I loved, he was sort of his coat was just thick and his mane and the hide was just all over. He looked like a rock star. And he had all these white little blondie sort of tips on the end. And he wasn't your classic mature, dominant bull. He's now post-rut. And all the bulls, the bigger boys, are sort of put away. So what his actual horns look like, they were very, I think he's 5.5, 6 years old. It was very thick, but then they taper down into these very long blades. I think he measured about 12. And once again, it's not, I was happy to shoot a 10-inch bull. It's not, for me, the trophy was not the thing. It was a whole experience. But he just looked the part for me. And he wouldn't leave this nanny alone. The nanny ended up coming closer and closer. And I got to about 40 metres. And I remember ranging him, and I thought if he gets to there, to a particular point, I'm going to have a crack. And it was downhill, and it's probably the longest shot I've done. And the shot was perfect. And what I mean by perfect is where I aimed, I hit. But unfortunately, when you look at the anatomy and also the vegetation, I hit a little bit too high. I got double lung, but the arrow zipped right through him. And it wasn't until when I had to put a second arrow into him, and finally I had to look at his anatomy, and I took a photo for future reference. The mane is so thick that you really, a lot of people gauge where their shot placement's going to be with where the front leg is, where the scapula is, where you imagine the heart is. With Tahr in particular, their heart's a little bit more forward, like some of those African species. And the lungs, you got more lung room, way more lung room. If you've ever seen a photo, and I did all this studying beforehand. So when I hit him, he was still on the nanny, didn't know what happened, but it wasn't until they went up and over that he just couldn't move. So he just went into a little crevice and he just laid there. And we then had to sort of get in and, do another shot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I think what you were explaining earlier about him being, 5.5, 6, that's definitely nothing to sort of shy away from. Like that's a nice mature sort of animal, like in that right age class. Obviously, he's going to have those nice sort of more polished, unrefined horns where they haven't been broomed off, like something that's like an 8-year-old that's been rutting and fighting and doing all these sorts of things. So they're not going to be as broomed and damaged. And anytime you're shooting a 12-inch bull, you're shooting a beautiful animal. So it's cool. We're back here recording at Dad's place at the moment, which is why, I don't get home very often, but seeing the bull, he's all mounted and taxidermied. He's an incredible animal, and I would be absolutely stoked if I could manage something similar and share in a similar adventure. But my next question was...
Can I just, sorry, interrupt you, just when you're talking about the horns themselves, the growth rings actually get smaller, and they have a massive growth spurt at the start, and then you notice the rings get smaller and smaller. But not only that, what I was reading was they don't actually, each ring doesn't represent their actual birth, it represents a winter, because everything cycles around winter or whenever they're coming into their rut. So yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah, they're cool animals, and I guess they sort of show their life cycle in their horns, which is something that you don't get with deer species where they're casting their antlers every year. Obviously, like a big 6x6 red stag's going to be, quite an older animal unless it's got incredible genetics. It's going to be older than most 2x2s, for example. But these tahr, same as buffalo, scrub bulls, bangtang, whatever it may be, rams, Dale sheep in the USA, they're species that carry their growth rings, their annuli, which are, each year basically on their head. And in some instances, you were talking about winter, you can see almost their hardship lines. And, different years, the growth might be less because there was less feed or a harsher winter, a harsher summer, and all these sorts of things that it adds a bit of character to each set of horns, each animal. But laying hands on your bull tahr, was there anything that took you by surprise, or was it sort of just relief at that point?
Oh, it was definitely a relief, but it was just the first shot. The first shot, I felt comfortable and I hit exactly where I wanted to, and I thought he was just going to pop up, just drop on the spot. But when you get your hands on the bull and you look at the mane and how it's just hides his anatomy, you know what I mean? And so you really, and also the vegetation didn't help. That shocked me or it surprised me. Like I just thought, it was going to be, oh yeah, get there, find the leg, go up a certain, as you do. And yeah, and the other thing is how pretty they are. They're just, I think they're a beautiful looking, very compact and, that they just, how they scale up and down the mountain and what they can do. Very goat-like, obviously. Do you know what family they belong to?
I believe they're a capra, like in that sheep or goat family. Yeah, but what I was going to say is I think when it comes to anytime you're hunting new species and it's something that you hear quite a lot with the mountain goat guys over in the USA, when you're hunting an animal, and I imagine it'd be similar probably with grizzly bears or muskox or something with really big capes, then you've sort of, you've got this animal or this skeleton and anatomy under basically this big hairy woolen rug. So you're trying to guess, you're like, oh yeah, that looks like middle of the animal, but it's actually middle of, hair below, then the sternum, the chest cavity, then you've got hair above the actual animal where it finishes. So you might put it in the middle, but that might be high on the actual animal's vitals in that instance. Say,
don't forget, they average between 70 to 100 kilos. So they're not a small animal, but because they're presenting in like a block, and they hold their heads quite high, then you got this sort of mane, like a whole mane of, from the top of their back all the way down, and it's consistent through the whole body. And then you've got these little, they almost look like a little prehistoric thing. You got these little feet that don't, the hair covers most of the feet. So yeah, but look, I think they probably stand about 1 meter high at the shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah, they're bigger than you think. They're bigger than like a billy goat or something that we're used to. But super tough animals. Like you see guys shooting them, especially with bow hunting gear, having a fatal hit on them running off a cliff and literally ending up down the bottom of a ravine. And fortunately for you, he didn't quite do that. You were able to get the second shot and be successful in hunting your first bull tahr. So amazing accomplishment. I'm glad that, it obviously worked out for you. Is there anything that you would do, I guess, differently next time? Or is there any like particular little bits of advice or tips that you'd give to someone, planning a similar sort of hunt?
I think fitness, I could have been fitter, and you always, like just keeping up with Mike. The other thing is, I think you need to do your homework in regards to export certificates. You need to know all the ins and outs. That's very important because you won't get your hide or your cap home, your skull cap home. I was fortunate enough because I went through, with Mike and Maddie at Real Kiwi Hunting. They were very professional. As soon as I shot my animal, they butchered it. They used the meat. They then, clean the skull, tan the hide, and within 20 minutes of me getting home, there was an application online. I think it's a declaration for personal game trophies, entering or leaving the country, then entering another country. And then you need to, I think it goes through I'm not 100%, I think it's the New Zealand Ministry for Primal Industry or something, primary industry.
Yeah, that's okay. We don't have to necessarily give people all that information. It's just something to be aware of. We're obviously not experts in this case, but if you're not doing a guided hunt, obviously if you're doing a guided hunt, I think that's stuff that the guides and outfitters should obviously be preparing you on. But otherwise, if you're listening to this podcast and planning a hunt with New Zealand, then obviously you're from Australia, you're doing an international hunt. There's obviously customs to clear from over there. Back over here, there's boots to clean, tents to clean,
absolutely,
gear
yes,
to clean, all these sorts of things. And yeah, trophy exports are just one other component to that. But was there anything you wanted to add on New Zealand, or are you happy if we jump over to the next hunt?
What you mentioned earlier, we all have our dreams, and I think just make them happen. I've learnt that I was very scared because of the terrain, and we planned it. You guys motivated me, and then I believed it. We trained, and when it happened, I think it was just for me to go over there on my own, get a little hire car, and then just experience New Zealand as I did. It'll be one of those things when I'm sitting in my deathbed, I'll just have a little smile and thought, yeah, good on you, Nick. You did it for yourself, And I would encourage anyone out there, regardless of the age, if you want to do something, just put pen to paper, do as much research, and then just go and do it. Yeah, so I got to thank you and your brother, from the bottom of my heart for making me, I guess, commit to one of my dreams and making it happen, because so often, other things in life get, in front of you. And James said, look, mate, you're 60, you deserve it, do it. And bang.
Yeah, it's good. And that's where I feel like it's very fitting to say that James and I are very proud of you and what you were able to do and go over there and achieve. And it was something that you obviously set your mind to, worked extremely hard, getting a base level of fitness and then going over there and achieving it. It's something that a lot of 60-year-olds wouldn't tackle. And it is funny, being a son and saying to their dad, like, I'm proud of you. It's normally probably the inverse that you hear it a lot, but it probably speaks a bit to our relationship, where now we're at the age where we're doing these things and adventures together, where we're more like good mates rather than father-son. Obviously, like the roles have sort of somewhat changed a little bit, where you obviously taught us everything we know about bow hunting, and then we've gone and taken that to a whole range of different hunts, and we've sort of gone and done things that I guess you didn't do when you were younger, and now it's cool to be sharing what we know with you and refreshing you to go and do things that, James and I haven't been over to South Africa yet. You've gone and done that. You've taken a bull tahr. I haven't done that, but it's cool that you're sort of seeing how we train, how we get our gear ready, all these different things, and going and doing things that, are very much in our laneway and stuff that we want to do. And hopefully we can share a New Zealand trip together in the future, and go and, do more of these adventures. I have personally used Hoyt bows for over 20 years now. Building the most innovative and technological advanced gear, their carbon bows are the lightest, leanest, and most compact on the market. Quite frankly, I treat mine like hell, throwing them around, banging them on rocks and scrub whilst on the hunt. Time and time again, it has performed when I've needed it most. I'm currently running the Carbon RX9 with 80-pound limbs. Even at that weight, it's easy to draw and throw absolute darts. This past year, I've been shooting the best I've ever shot, and a lot of that comes from my confidence in Hoyt. Get serious, get Hoyt. Head to their website to check them out today, or, for our Australian listeners, head in store to Venture Hunting and Outdoors. The team not only stock Hoyt, but also have tons of other important archery equipment hanging from their walls. Mention Twin Elements and they will look after you. Alrighty, so the next little segment of the podcast, we're going to jump forward a couple of months. Dad obviously got home. kept going with his training and whatnot, and was shooting his bow pretty regularly. And we were lucky enough to get the opportunity to head up north and join Matty Moore and Brad Smith up at Cape York, Queensland, at Kayuga Adventures. And they run an absolutely amazing outfit up there. They get tens of bow hunters through the doors every single year up in Cape York, North Queensland. And they've got, as everyone would have heard, some of the most infamous toothy, hooky Cape York boars imaginable. So we were lucky enough to go up there and do a bit of filming and hunting as part of Kayuga Adventures and with Kayuga Broadheads, which we've been shooting now for many years. But we did get lucky enough to extend the invitation out to Dad. And you would have heard the first couple of episodes of the podcast earlier this year where James spoke about his adventures. I spoke about my adventures. Brad and Matt joined us on a podcast and we spoke about some of those hunts. So if you haven't listened to those, go back and you'll get a bit of a more in-depth conversation about our week that we had at Kayuga Adventures. But we didn't actually get to hear from you at the time just because we were so busy doing the hunt, getting the most out of that. And then you had to fly home to Melbourne. And I sort of haven't really seen you since. That was the end of 2025. It's now fresh 2026. But let's catch up on that adventure. We'll keep it a bit brief. We don't have to go into as much detail, obviously, as New Zealand, which was sort of one of those once-in-a-lifetime adventures or fresh sort of experiences. But you did take, a couple of handy Cape York boars, one being what I'd think is probably your personal best as far as tusk goes. What were sort of your highlights from the trip?
Oh, anytime you're out in the bush with, Brad was fantastic for me. But I think just the whole the landscape, but also the boars themselves, they were incredible. Like just most of the boars that we saw there, and we were blessed. I think that was a very unique trip. We got there just before the rain, so water was scarce, but just how hooky they were. They were, every boar that we sort of bumped was pretty, over 2.5, 3, 4 inches, It was brilliant. Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, you and James got a fair few, and Brad did. So it was a trip that was very unique. I don't know if most trips unwind like that, but it was fantastic to see the quality of the boars there.
Yeah, I think what we were seeing was sort of the combination of a bit of a perfect storm and a place that it's just so rugged and remote. If you go and draw, a map of the tip or top of Cape York, Australia, like Queensland, you go and basically point to the middle of it, the most untouched sort of country. That's where Strasbourne Station is, where the boys run their Kayuga Adventures. And I think that paired with the combination, as you said, of the water being so dry and animals congregating together and all of these factors just meant that, pigs are getting old by being in a remote location. The old pigs have to come into water, have to come into the remaining little bits of food and food sources and that type of stuff. So you're getting this perfect storm where, we're timing it right. It's obviously extremely hot and humid. So you've gone from freezing cold, winter New Zealand to your next sort of major hunt being up in Cape York where it's 35, 40 degrees every day and super hot and humid. But you did, as we said, see these boars, and a lot of them, you might walk a couple of kilometres of a creek section and not see that many pigs, but on 1 or 2 or 3 little water holes, you might find 8 boars that are all, they're not very big pigs, and that's, you'll talk in a second about that first boar you shot would have been maybe lucky to be 40 kilos, but had probably 3 inches of ivory sticking out of his jaw, which is just, you don't quite see that anywhere else as clearly as in Cape York, Queensland, Australia.
Yeah, 100%. I was very shocked with how, under condition they were. They were very, and they're obviously holding out for the rain. Brad was saying they were sort of going from one food source to another, and obviously water is essential there. So I think they were just doing it really tough. And a lot of times, we would go from water source to water source, and you just have to do a really good thorough look around, because they'd be tucked in under branches, and they'd be tucked in little crevices, and it was very unique hunting. I was shocked in a lot of ways, because where you would think there would be a boar, there wasn't, and there's other times you walk and you think, oh, there's nothing here, and sure enough, you sort of have a really good look around, and there's one you just see an ear flick, or and that's the other thing that I really appreciated. The boys at Kayuga run like a little, what would you call it? Just a little course.
Yeah, it's just a 3D course. They're really, really big into. I probably shouldn't go any further without saying, if you're someone that's a new hunter that wants to learn a heap in a short period of time by some genuine, really good expert guys that have been doing this for a long, long time, both incredible ethical hunters as well as really, really good on the tuning and archery tech components. Like, for example, these guys are all involved. When we're talking about Matty Moore, Brad Smith, Ian Summers, some of these guys that work up there and run Kayuga Adventures, they're designers and engineers of broadheads, or they're very much in the design and creation of certain brands of arrows that are on the market, or they've been bow hunting for 20, 30, 40 longer years doing this consistently. So the second you go up there to Kayuga, every morning when the wind's down and not sort of blowing, rather than go hunting when it's sort of a bit of a lull in the day, they sit there and they go through every single person's gear and say, okay, you're using this arrow, using this draw length, this draw weight of your bow, this broadhead. Let's see how your arrow flies. And Brad will get you sitting there on a target. You'll shoot your bow and you'll basically go and you'll watch on the camera and then on a big TV how that arrow is flying. Okay, it's porpoising, or it's doing this, or it's fishtailing, or whatever terminology they assign to it. No, it's flying perfect. We don't have to do anything. All good. They'll go through and they'll tinker things catered to your bow, and you basically leave there, often in a matter of hours, a better shot or a better archer than what you came. And then you go and take those lessons that you've just learned in the morning of shooting targets and 3D courses, and they go and lay pigs. They've got 3D feral pig targets that they'll go and bury under logs and in the brush, and they'll do real world obscure sort of angles. So it's not like you just walk down a trail, oh, there's a pig 20 meters in front of me, I'm going to shoot it while it's broadside, there's no brush in the way. Like, they'll go and purposely bury it under a log. You've got to then go and walk up to it, stop at a certain point, try and work out, is it quartering to me, quartering away, laying on its side, front, back, and it's all under leaf litter. And you've got to real time go and look with your binos and go, that's all I'm seeing is a bit of a black target. Where am I putting this arrow? And just the combination of that means that you're learning so much in such a short period of time. And again, these hunts, I think you go up there for nearly 5 days to a week. And whether you shoot one animal, 10 animals after the completion of the trip, no animals, you're guaranteed to leave as a better hunter. And like, I saw that real world with both James and I, but also Dad. And again, he was sort of tutored by Brad quite a bit, and they have a really fun relationship where they go and hunt and they just end up being good mates by the end of it. But I saw Dad get, all his arrows looked over, and his fletchers looked at, and his nocks and his broadheads and everything. And it just, really helped him out on this trip.
Another thing I'd like to sort of elaborate on, both Matty and Brad practice the way they're going to play. And what I mean by that is, most people chasing boars would go out early in the morning or late, and try to get them off food sources and, all these other things. Whereas these boys go, no, we're going to wait till they bed down in water, and that's where we're going to fight them. So what they do is, like Ayden was saying, they've got a 3D course that puts you, the hunter, in the same scenario of shooting a hog that you don't see the complete, body contour. It's got a log over, obscure on one part, or it's tucked in, or he's dug in halfway. So you almost you'll have a shot, and a lot of times I'm thinking, oh yeah, pretty easy, 20 metre shot. And then you have a look, the alignment of where it's going in and the exit, and you go, ooh, I'm only clipping the bottom lung, or I've missed, I've come out too far forward. So, and Brad had a couple of techniques, and maybe you can discuss that with the ear and, and trying to find where the point of the shoulder was, because a lot of times when they're buried or under rubble or deep in mud, you don't get that privilege. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the anatomy on a bedded pig is the exact same as the anatomy on a standing pig in terms of where the heart's sitting and all this type of stuff. It's just that on a bedded shot, the angles and the bone and all these types of things become folded and obscured and you're hidden by water or mud or dirt. It's not as easy as just shooting a broadside pig where its anatomy is sitting nicely within its thorax or its abdominal cavity and thoracic cavity, and its legs extended forward or straight, and it's got all its bones aligned. Like once they lie down and you're trying to shoot its lungs, it might be covered by its humerus, scapula and spine, for example, or its head might be tucked up and all you can see is its head and in under near its jugular vein and in the front of its shoulder. And you've got to know how to, one, that your gear can make the most of it and get in there to where you need to hit the vitals, but two, you've got to be confident that you know your arrow flight and you can put that broadhead within an inch. It's no longer like a 3 or 4 inch kill zone, it's an inch, because an inch above you're hitting vine, an inch below you're hitting mud. You have to hit that little speck of hair that you're aiming for that will get that arrow into the vitals. And this is where I think it's a really, really steep but really, really good learning curve up there at Kayuga Adventures, and you just learn so much about gear and refining it, perfecting it, getting good gear, but then also shot placement. Plus it is, as Dad can attest to, like a game rich or pest species rich environment. But we also saw so many native animals that was amazing. Like the wildlife, you're in a remote place, so the wildlife on offer, we were seeing freshwater crocodiles, we saw a saltwater crocodile, we saw endless amounts of, or abundant amounts of kookaburras, kingfishers, cockatoos, egrets, jabiroos, brolgas, whatever bird species you can imagine we were seeing. And it just all adds to this top-end experience that was absolutely phenomenal.
I'd like to note that I'm not per se a fisherman, but Brad said to me, what do you want to do? What do you want to get out of this trip? And I said, mate, I would love to catch a Saratoga. He goes, done, easy. And this particular day we come over a water source, and I think after I caught 4 or 5, are they called sooty grunters? The ones that, or black brim or something, they make that noise. Yeah, so we had a couple of lures, and then finally I caught mine. Wasn't huge, probably 10, 12 inches, but it actually hit the lure right next to me. It was just to see it come up on the side and the way it was only a small achievement, but it was something that I would always remember,
What was that? Sorry, what
fishing.
fish?
It was Saratoga.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, I knew you'd been pretty keen to catch one of those.
They're beautiful, and everything was catch and release. And there's a couple of times where, like for me, no pig or no fishing spot is worth my life. And every water source, I thought there'd be a saltwater crocodile in there. So, Brad's going, no, you can get up close. I go, nah, I'm comfortable here. Like, even when we're stalking, we're coming in close. I don't know. That's how I am.
Yeah, it's I think a good attitude, safe attitude to have the second you sort of get north in Australia, whether it's in North Queensland or the Northern Territory, WA, just being diligent and aware is always a good strategy for long-term longevity and survival. But the last thing I wanted to talk about with Kayuga Adventures, for anyone that's half keen on booking, is that spots do fill out extremely quickly. I'm hoping that Dad can get up there again later in the year in 2026. So if you are looking at maybe doing a booking, please just get in touch with Kayuga Adventures on their socials, on their website, or with Maddie Moore, and just hit him up. They run a quality camp, and that's the last thing I was going to say is just the camaraderie is another thing that's incredible. Like Dad this year, I don't know if James and I, just with, new life things that are getting thrown at us and new hunting opportunities and things like that, we're not sure if James and I will particularly be able to get up there again this year. We'd love to, and potentially go and join Dad for another trip. We'll just see what happens and how things sort of fall. But we've been encouraging Dad to, get things done. Like I would love to go and hunt Tahr, but I might go and hunt Tahr, and hopefully Dad can maybe go and hunt up at Kayuga Adventures again. But the best thing is that even if Dad went up by himself and couldn't organise like a hunting party, you're going there and you're meeting 3 or 4 other blokes that are in camp, and then there's normally 2 hunters to 1 guide, and then, Matty Moore's flying around fixing cars, and then they've got a mechanic there and a station hand and a cook, and, just things like that are happening. So it's just constantly surrounded by like-minded, good people with similar sort of values. And that's just what Kayuga Adventures has become. And there's years and years and years of hunting stories there in camp and lessons and knowledge. And it's just a great atmosphere to be part of. And again, I'm really glad that we got to actually go and, finish off and wrap up 2025 with that hunt with you. And again, we were proud of you. I know we give you a bit of shit. Sometimes you're not always the fastest and whatnot, or you don't always come with your gear sort of as good as you potentially could or should do, but you always give it your best effort. And yeah, James and I are always proud of you in that aspect. And it was good to see you obviously go and nail a Cape York boar, because I don't think you'd actually been up there. James and I hadn't been hunting Cape York before, so it certainly lived up to the hype with some of those hooky boars that we got to experience.
Whether you're chasing your next big hunt or perfecting your target archery game, precision is everything. That's where Option Archery comes in. Specialising in the quiverizer and option sights, they deliver the accuracy and reliability every serious archer demands. Lightweight, durable, and engineered to perform. Those are the tools that make every shot count. Upgrade your bow setup and see the difference on your next hunt. I've particularly enjoyed the 4S sight. Transitioning from other single pins, I've enjoyed the benefit of having the option to be able to dial in a single pin or multi-pin setup. The horizontal pin orientation has also helped with my target panic and sight picture, dramatically improving my shooting. Head to Venture Hunting and Outdoors website to order your Option Archery gear today, because every shot deserves precision.
Well, it is that time of the show. I've really enjoyed sitting down with Dad. I don't really get to see him a great deal unless we are hunting nowadays, just with where I'm living up in North Queensland and James living in Armidale in New South Wales, and then Dad living in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. But are there any hunts that you want to get up to this year in 2026 particularly? I know that we've got red deer camp and hog deer camp where we'll be catching up sort of in March, April for a little bit, which is sort of the next trip. But have you got anything towards the tail end or 2027 that you're looking forward to? Any new international trips that you're looking forward to?
Good question. I'm still very keen to finish the Grand Slam. I'd love a red deer. And we definitely put in a lot of work last year during the rut, post-rut, and got to see some good deer, but unfortunately just couldn't get the deal done. Hoggies, obviously, that's the big ask. They are such tiny creatures, and to get one with a bow, I've already got one. Not a monster, but I'm grateful I got a representative. I would love to even get to see a couple of good stags. That'd be good. I intend on putting a lot of hard work in. I would love to potentially go back and hunt another tahr. I would. It's just God's world up there, and it's just different.
Yeah, no, honestly, after hearing the stories, I'd obviously seen the photos and heard some of the stories. If you haven't, go and check out Dad on social media. He's got an account there that he mainly just reshares a lot of our stuff, again, being probably a proud father. He shares a lot of our content. He's definitely ingrained in the ethics and values that James and I share, and very much a part of what Twin Elements is. So you can go and find Dad over there. But otherwise, hopefully this episode has inspired you. If you're an older person, going to that middle part of your life like Dad is, just go and do these trips. Book them. You might not be ready, but there's always time to get fitter, be, stronger, get your gear more in line. But you mentally have to sort of decide, I am going to go and do this trip, book it, and then give yourself something to aim at, something to look forward to. Because otherwise, I find it myself now, I'm only in my 30s, but I'll literally go and say, I'll do it later, I'll do it eventually, I've said that about tahr for the last couple of years, and I think I'm at the point where I might have to join you on this trip, and we might just have to book a tahr trip, and we can go and try and do one DIY at the end of the year. And yeah, it all starts with just booking the flights, working out where you're going to go and do it. So hopefully this has been a bit of an inspiring podcast for some people. You've heard that, here's a 60-year-old in front of you guys. He's got fitter than he's ever been in the last 10, 15 years, gone over to New Zealand, and he's climbing up knife edge cliffs and shooting bull tahr. So thank you very much for joining us, Dad. If you're happy, we're just going to wrap up today's FAQ segment with a recording from our friend Nick Morton. So we got a question from Brody Skurzik. I think I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies, Brody. And he's just said, hey, mate, just a question maybe for an FAQ, but when chasing mountain boars when they're rutting, what's the best way to find them? For example, will they be in heavy timber or maybe on a grazing patch on the side of the hills or something of that sort? Cheers, mate. So again, I have a little bit of an opinion on this, but to be honest, it's mainly taken from my experience of hunting mountain boars with Nick Morton. So I thought, honestly, who better to share their perspective with us than Nick? So I was good enough to send him. So I sent him a message on Instagram, and he was good enough to send us a voice recording.
Hey boys, I appreciate you reaching out and letting me answer this question. So someone has asked, when chasing rutting boars, where is the best place to find them? There's a lot of ways to skin this cat, but essentially rutting boars are rutting over a sow in season or on heat. So obviously you want to be in the region where there's an in-season sow. Now there's a few ways to tell this. One of the often telltale signs that I'll see is you'll see a lot of satellite boars or younger boars. They'll be cruising around back and forth and they'll have swollen nuts. Now this will basically indicate their testosterone levels are elevated and they're what you would call rutting. So these satellite boars are often going to be in the vicinity of where that in-season sow is, and a lot of the times that's going to be in a tighter patch of scrub or in a choked off gully, and a lot of the time there's going to be a big mature boar who's going to be holding that sow in that thick scrub and obviously keeping those satellite boars at a further distance. So what I like to look for is, obviously, if I see those satellite boars roaming around back and forth, you'll get a bit of an idea of the area that they're patrolling. And in my head, I'll go, okay, so within this region here, there's going to be a sow in heat and there's probably going to be a big toothy mature boar with that sow there. So what I'll then do is I'll concentrate. Often I'm glassing, I'm hunting the mountains a lot. So you'll concentrate looking at that area. Can you see any other boars? And often you might see 2 or 3 satellite boars to start with. That'll turn into 4 or 5, and you'll see them. They'll be coming back and forth from a particular thick patch of scrub. That's a pretty good indication that in that thick patch of scrub, that's where that sow is going to be laid up. And a lot of the time, there is going to be a big boar in there. Now, some people make the mistake of seeing a toothy boar. They go, yep, there's the boar with a sow. I'm going to go there and shoot it straight away. A lot of the time, yes, there will be a decent boar hanging with a sow. Those really truly special mountain boars are often held off at a distance. They're the smart old boars past that 7, 8, 9-year-old bracket, and they don't necessarily want to be with that sow in the daylight hours. So what I do is I'll find an in-season sow, I'll find some rutting action, you'll hear the pigs carrying on, and I'll know that sow's in that particular thicket. I'm glassing and I'm looking. I may have 2 or 3 hours of light left and I'll simply sit and observe. And what you'll see is there'll be boars come and go. You may see a quite handy boar there. I like to sit, be refrained, and then often what will happen is it might be 20, 30 minutes from last light. That absolute gremlin's going to walk out of stage left and come and grab that sow and take her off the what is currently the dominant boar. So it does pay to be diligent and simply just watch the mobs, because it's not what's just there at the immediate moment. Generally, when you have those sows in seasons, they will draw boars from 4, 5, 6 Ks away. And those really old boars are going to be sitting, waiting till last light. And then they'll come in, kick the younger boars away and have the sow for the night. So it pays to be patient, pay attention to those younger boars, and basically play the long game if you really want to shoot those big boars. There's no hard and fast rules with it. An in-season sow can be anywhere, but it's generally going to be in a more tucked away, secluded section, patch of timber, blackberry, something like that, where a boar can take her in and hold her there. But you can also have those sows out feeding and the boars are going to be feeding with them. So it's a really great time to hunt those pigs. It makes the boars drop their guard. It stops them from being nocturnal, and it gets those big boys out in a position where you can put an arrow in them. Hope this helped.
Alrighty, so yeah, a great response there from Nick. I said just give us a couple of minutes worth, and he went and absolutely nailed that question, and I couldn't agree more with what he's said. Nick, for those that don't know, owns Bow Hunting Only, which is a small little store in the Newcastle region of New South Wales, and he helps tens of bow hunters. He has his bow hunting beginner courses where they go and chase feral pigs, goats, all this type of stuff. So make sure you go and check out Nick for more of his hunting adventures. But as you can hear, he's very passionate about mountain boars. And hopefully for you, Brody, he has given you some information to think about when it comes to finding rutting mobs in the hills of, wherever you're chasing them in the mountains. So best of luck with your adventures. If anyone has a question following this podcast, then please send us an email with the subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au, or simply send either James, myself, or the Twin Elements social media accounts a DM, and we will strive to get back to you guys with answers to those future episodes of the Twin Elements podcast. That wraps us up for today. As you guys are hearing this, we have just released our Bow Hunting the Rut series over on our YouTube channel. We have around 7 films dropping over the next few weeks where we're hunting epic red stags in the mountains of New South Wales, in the mountains and Brisbane Valley region of Queensland. So there's an episode dropping every Wednesday evening from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the Twin Elements YouTube channel. Please continue to like, subscribe, and comment on all of those videos to help show your support for us and help us grow the channel. There is even a little bonus episode at the end of this series where Dad actually goes and takes a few billies and boars with the bow during the rut as a bit of bycatch. I think he even shoots a fallow buck. So make sure you guys tune into that one. There's plenty of really quality content coming out on the YouTube channel, and we're really trying to grow that one. We're creeping up to around 25k subscribers. So hopefully in the next month or two, we'll be able to crack that milestone and celebrate that with you guys as potentially some form of a giveaway. Next, please continue to check out our website, support us over there. We have a heap of blogs, recipes, hunting stories, all these sorts of things. Plus, we obviously have the Twin Elements prints, which we run sales on and have an absolutely awesome display of prints. We've got around 40 to choose from. So please check those out. They directly support James and I and make what we're doing here at Twin Elements possible. Lastly, please continue to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast. James and I absolutely love everything that we're doing here, sharing our stories, knowledge, tips, tricks, you name it. And we appreciate everyone's contributions, whether they're FAQs or listener topics that you guys want discussed. To contact us regarding the podcast, please just email us at info@twinelements.com.au and we will touch base with you guys there. Thank you very much, legends. Thank you very much, Dad. Appreciate you joining us for the podcast, and it was good to catch up as always. We will touch base with you on the next episode of the Twin Elements podcast.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. A pleasure always talking about hunting. We live it, we breathe it, and if we can make other bow hunters out there even more ethical and successful, then it's a positive step.